to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. It's episode number 26. I'm here with Kristofer Cowles from the wholly owned and operated, I don't know if you call it a company, organization, and manhusbanddad.com. He has got tons of stuff going on, speaker, influencer, I guess we could call him, and, kind of lay minister, if you want to say that too, but I'll let him fill in the gaps. I appreciate you being here, Kristofer. Thanks for joining me.
Sure, Kevin, I appreciate it. Well, wholly owned and operated is it's a registered 501c3. Give the IRS their pound of flesh. And that was a learning curve. I'll tell you what, doing that. But so it is incorporated so that everything's above board, I guess.
Yeah, right.
So that's where I hail from, if you will.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me what, because I was reading your bio and it looks like you've, kind of started in one way and then that was absorbed by by the official 503c. So just kind of give me that whole backstory and what you've got going on.
Absolutely, sure. So, Man, Husband, Dad really came about, 2023, right? So about 10 years ago. And you're probably familiar with Thoreau and his most men lead lives of quiet desperation and that sort of stuff. And I was, 40 something and had was kind of in that place. I'd been a stay-at-home dad at that point for about 5 years, and we can get into how that all came about. But I was really kind of trying to figure me out, while raising 3 boys, and the first thing a man thinks of is, well, if I don't have it together, what am I teaching them, and so I had, I'd always been a reader. I've always been learning from other people, particularly the guys who know something, and I had found a spiritual director at that time who I went and saw, and he was putting on a retreat. He's a Franciscan friar. So think Friar Tuck, only slimmer, we've been
maybe without the little circle haircut, or did he?
That's correct. He's not I forget what those are called, but yes, he doesn't have that, half the time I see him in street clothes. So so I went on a retreat, and he had been all over the world, and has written several books. And I'll tell you, his name is Father Albert Hass, and he's just a great guy. And he, in his presentations and stuff, was talking about when he was a first-year novitiate, figuring out should he be a friar or not. He decided that he wasn't going to be, so he went to the superior and said, I'm not a Saint Francis. I'm not commune with the animals, build my church. I'm just not that guy. And the superior said, well, that's great, Albert, because God already has a Francis. He needs an Albert, and I realized, because, I was a motivational speaker when I was 23 years old. And this was almost 20 years later that I've gone through this retreat, because I had wanted to be real famous. I was going to be the next Zig Ziglar.
Oh, okay.
Great guys, Brian Tracy, Robbins, all these guys, but here I was 20 years after being a motivational speaker, a paid one in college, wondering, well, what, So, you have your time during the retreat to go, think. And so I did. And I wrote down all these things I was, and entrepreneur, speaker. I even put down, the big things, liar, all these things that I could identify myself as, and took up 2-3 pages of my journal. And in there, I also put man, husband, and dad. And I'm looking at all these things, and I wrote my name down at the bottom of it. And I realized God was telling me, Kristofer, I've got all these. I've got entrepreneurs. I've got liars. I've got Zig Ziglars. What I need is a Kristofer Cowles. And I crossed out all the things that everybody else was, and the things that were left was a man, a husband, and a dad. I did not like that answer. Because I wanted to be all this stuff. And then, I realized I needed to be, a man first. And so I started exploring these things. And since then have essentially been teaching myself and my boys things that I had been probably teaching in the without really knowing it, I guess. Teaching them that you have to be a man before you can be anything else. You have to be a man before you're a husband, or if God calls you to a different vocation, a priest, a brother, a single guy, whatever. You can't make that decision until you know you're a man. Now, we know we're men. We have those chromosomes, so that's pretty obvious, but you have to at some point become the man, because the same chromosomes are in boys. There's a difference. So you can't have a manly vocation as a husband or a dad or anything unless you're a man first. So kind of just discovering that was a big deal. And I was raised by a man, and I used there's a man capital M and there's a man small M. Okay. And the small M guys are guys who eventually I guess don't know who they're supposed to be. Yeah. And I was raised by someone like that, a dilettante, if you will, smartest man in the world, but couldn't teach me really what I needed to know. And oddly enough, his mother, my grandmother, raised me for several years, and all during my teenage years, I spent every summer with her. And I tell people she taught me how to hold my fork and hold my tongue. I'm really good at holding my fork. So fast forward, and we can talk. We do man ceremonies and stuff like that. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But fast forward to 2019, and my wife Beth and I started Wholly Owned and Operated, and it was really just that we were intent on helping people grow in their Catholic faith. Okay. She's got a long pedigree of Catholicism. She's got a master's in catechetics and evangelizations, and I've got a pretty face. So we'd been working on that for a year, and then what happened in 2020, the pandemic. And I'd been doing social media marketing for quite some time, and had on the same day, Beth's working full time for a local parish. On the same day, she gets notice that they're cutting her down to 10 hours and cutting her pay of that 10 hours that's left by 10%. And my clients all say that they're going to take stuff in-house. So in one day, our income dropped just over 94%.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a challenge.
But we spent a lot of time being who we're supposed to be. We were ready to launch Wholly Owned and Operated. Beth and I are sitting at lunch, and I said, this is God giving us the opportunity, put up or shut up. So we did, and in 2 weeks we had a website. We launched on on Palm Sunday, of 2020 and really haven't looked back. And what was really neat is I tell people, I teach that if you are who you're supposed to be, God will provide for you the things that he wants you to do to support that being. Mm-hmm. And within 6 weeks of starting Wholly Owned and Operated, we had about $7,500 in donations, just to do everything from the incorporating to putting food on the table. And it was a great lesson. We've had those little lessons along the way, but it was a great lesson in affirming that, the being is first, the doing comes later. And in the bio, for instance, that I sent you, notice it doesn't say that Kristofer is a business owner. Kristofer has run 12 businesses, in the last 30 years. It says he's a man, husband, dad. When I introduce myself at cocktail parties, well, here in Texas, it's brisket parties, I guess. And if a warm Miller Lite is a cocktail, and I tell people that I don't do I said I'm a man, I'm a husband, and I'm a dad, and I do whatever the Lord provides for me to do to support that. It's a simple equation that took me about 44 years to figure out, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's it, and that's the last 10 years, and obviously things built up for 40 years prior to that, since I was that motivational speaker, I'm comfortable in front of crowds now to share because I was 23. What do I know? Right? I'm talking to high schoolers and I'm quoting Stephen Covey. That's, and they're paying me for it,
Right.
And, which I know Covey would be glad to hear that high schoolers were getting it, but it led to this. It all led to this.
That's great. And I should point out that it's Wholly Owned and Operated, HOLY, not WHOLLY, I guess is how you spell it. That Holy.
I had one of those companies was a computer services and web hosting and web design company that I had for 16 years. And I knew right away that if we're going to have the HOLY, we should also have the WHOLLY. Mm-hmm. So when people hear it and they decide to type that in, they'll still come to us.
Yeah, I've owned a web development company since '98. So, and we don't do a ton with it anymore. But yeah, I have way too many domains that I always think, well, I'll just pick that up, and then, $15 a year, $20 a year, and all of a sudden you're like, do I really need this domain? But no, those definitely are super important. So you're using your motivational speaker background now, I assume, or you continue to do group organization, group speaking and that kind of stuff?
Sure. We do retreats. We're a tag team, Beth and I. We have a podcast that we do. It comes out every Thursday. We're starting our 4th year. It's called On the Road to Perfection. And it doesn't take long to hear Beth's compassion, her smarts, her ability to teach and communicate with anybody at any level of understanding, and to recognize that I wouldn't say that I'm the comic relief because I'm not that funny, but I'm the I guess I'm the average person, so we have a good back and forth just talking about life, living our faith in this world, while trying not to be of it, and even some secular things. We don't pay a lot of attention to the news, so we don't cover a lot of that because I'm not going to be judged at the end of my life on if I know Cal Ripken's box scores.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so you've been married just 1 year shy of us. I got married in 95. You got married in 96. And I try to be my wife's hype man. as they, in the rap world. That's
finish the last word of the rhyme. That's really, okay.
Yeah, you try to be the hype man, and your kids, I would guess, how old are your boys then?
23, 18, and 16.
Okay, so you're still in the thick of it with the teenagers. My girls are 25, just turned 25 and 23. So we're kind of in that awesome empty nesters thing.
We got a great plan for that.
Yeah, I don't really understand the huge trepidation or lamentation of the lamenting of when the kids are out of the house. I mean, I love my children, but I love them from afar.
Yeah, no, I did that. My wife and I just went camping last week, and the 16-year-old went to Boys State, and the 18-year-old was a counselor at Boys State. And our 23-year-old has an internship in the Defense Department, and so he held down the fort at the house, giving him kind of a sense, because he's going to start working for them in January, giving him a sense of the house on my own, that sort of stuff. The other two are taken care of, and Beth and I go and disconnect. We went to a state park, identified 31 different bird species, and we have a plan for an RV in about 15 months. And the youngest, he skipped a grade in school, so he's going to graduate a year early, and so he's going to spend a year with us on the road. Which for him is great. He's going to see a lot of this country and learn a lot, about it, boots on the ground. And we're gonna change our backyard whenever we want.
That's awesome. Yeah, in 2008, my kids were in 5th and 6th grade. We actually pulled them out of school. We homeschooled as they got into 6th and 7th grade, but we pulled them out of school and we did a 34 state tour with an RV. We didn't have a motorhome at. It was a blast. They 12,000 miles in about 100 days, and all up and down the East Coast, which is American history 101. From
absolutely, sure.
Colonial Williamsburg and Washington D.C. up through Boston and
Boston, Concord, Lexington, all that.
All that stuff. So that's a great plan. I think you'll really enjoy it. We have a motorhome now. I would love to do it again with just my bride, but we haven't done that as of yet. So let's go back to your kind of, it's funny that you say that, capital M versus little m. My daughter is hard of hearing. She's half deaf. So she's what they call single-sided deaf. And it's funny because in that community, which most people don't actually know, there are big D deaf and little D deaf. And it's kind of like this rite of passage, and there's this kind of way to get to be able to call yourself big D deaf, and there's like these requirements and all that stuff. So it made me think of that. Walk me through the difference and kind of what you're teaching on, and honestly, just the way that we're defining how to be a man, and the way that you taught your boys to do that.
Well, it's interesting because I'm half blind.
Okay.
This eye isn't winking at you. It's not closed or anything like that. On purpose. I lost my sight about 20 years ago. And my middle son, is an ASL aficionado. He's learned American Sign Language and is pursuing that as a career. It's a stepping stone career because he wants to, be in real estate and, own the world, So we've learned a lot about that culture as well. And it's interesting. I had to distinguish. I wrote a book, which I haven't published yet, about 6 years ago. In fact, if I had published it, I'd be on the 3rd edition, and the 3rd edition would say, attention to the stuff in the 1st edition. So I had to distinguish, when you're talking about man versus man. And again, hearkening back to Thoreau, and I don't really quote him a lot, it just seems useful in a conversation like this. Um, I think of my father, for instance, as I mentioned, a smart man. But I learned from somebody. I was in Amway back in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
And did fairly well at it. In fact, I became 1,000 pin the last day Amway was Amway before it became Quick Start. I was very proud of it.
Oh wow.
And wasn't just me, of course, it was my wife as well, but I remember sitting down with an upline emerald who's a good guy, and I told him about, my father, the divorce, the alcoholism, there's some abuse in there, there's, the it's a story. And I told him that story. And I said to him, what my father did, what, he played a good game with the cards he was dealt. And he looked at me and he said, Terry was his name. He said, Christopher, he sat down at the table. He chose that game. And that gave me a perspective. It really did give me a perspective. A few years earlier, Stephen Covey had told me that because I know the past that I came from, I can change my future. And right. I really found out, I felt found out. I was walking across campus reading his book, and I looked around like people were looking at me differently because I'd been hiding behind all this, poor me, this is what's happened to me, this is what I've got, this is what's going on, it's never going to change, blah, blah, blah. And so I realized we have a choice of what table we're going to sit down to. Now, of course, yes, we're all born, and we all have certain circumstances, nature versus nurture, that sort of thing. But Covey's point was you can change your nurture. And the small M man just goes through life without really contemplating who he's supposed to be. It's grow up, you graduate high school, you go to college, get a job, retire, die. That's the formula, right? I went to college for 8 years and I walked out the semester before I was supposed to graduate, and never looked back, started my own business. Because I realized I'm not supposed to be in college. It would have been real helpful 8 years and $150,000 earlier. That's right. If someone had told me that, So a man in the capitalized sense of the word knows who he is supposed to be. It doesn't mean that he is who he's supposed to be, because none of us are.
Right.
Exactly. In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5:48, Jesus says, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." Well, that's a big thing. I can't be God.
Right.
What does that mean? And I take that as meaning being who you're supposed to be. Because God is who he's supposed to be. He's perfect. He is who he's supposed to be. He is and does God.
Yep. So
we don't need more gods, just like we don't need more Francises or, or Zigglers, right?
Yeah.
We are here in this unique time, in this unique place, as unique individuals for a purpose, for a reason. And the capital M man is pursuing that perfection, who he's supposed to be, based on his aptitudes and the virtues of a man. And in pursuit of that perfection, what was Alexis like 30 years ago? A relentless pursuit of the perfection, right? Great tagline, can't use it, they own it, right? So, be who you're supposed to be. Is the mantra for the capital M man. I have to show you this. This came in the mail yesterday. It's from my son's school. This is their magazine that they send to everybody who sends them money, right? And right on the front, let's see. Yeah. Be who God made you to be.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, somebody must have heard me walking across campus, So the, look, I slip up all the time. I am very bad at being but I'm better than I was yesterday. And I'm much better than I was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I could have spent the last 10 years not even trying. I
Right.
could have spent the last 10 years not even knowing I could be who I was supposed to be. Most men, capital or lowercase m, I think, don't know who they're supposed to be. So, 15 years ago, I had a $72,000 a year contract with my computer services company. Things were going great. My oldest was 10 years old. And then, the headmaster at this private school was canned right in the middle of the day. The board walked in, said, "Get your stuff and go." And which was really weird because he's a great guy, and then the dominoes started falling, and I knew my services was one of those dominoes.
Oh, yeah.
So I prepared. The day it came, I only had one thing to take out of the office, me. And I went to Beth and they said, "Now what?" And a few days later, we went to church. We went to a church that we'd never gone to before because the boys were out of town. And so we said, "Well, let's go over there." We went. We sat in the front. We always do. And at the end, the priest made an announcement. "Please pray for us as we continue to look for our director of religious education," which is exactly what Beth was qualified for.
Oh, okay.
2 weeks later, she's working at the church. She's bringing home the bacon, and I got nothing, And I've, of course, the entrepreneurial spirit is always there. So, but I've been at home since then, running the home, running the businesses, and 5 years after that is when I discovered, that God needed a man, husband, and dad, and that's why He's got me at home to learn all about that. So here I was doing all this stuff and being all the stuff that I'd never planned on. But I tell my boys and have told them, and when this got started, I told them I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But I'm learning to love it because it's what God wants. And He knows better. And He also knows that I've got skills and stuff that He wants me to share. He just wants me to share them in different ways. I could do the Zig Ziglar pumping the pump, out on stage. Or I could talk about what works for me. Mm-hmm. And so He's opened those doors, 10 years after I thought it would be, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be on stage talking to So in the process of becoming the man and discerning, what it really means to be a husband and a dad, and I make that distinction between dad and father. I don't know if it was Dan Clark. I know I heard him first say it. It takes anybody can be a father. It takes a real special guy to be a dad. Mm-hmm. Dad, capital D, for instance, is well, I'm kind of jumping. You can't be a dad if you're not a husband. That's my perspective, And if you discern that you're supposed to be a husband, you have to discern that also means you're going to be a dad. Whether you're going to be a dad to your own children, biologically, or adopted children, or children in the neighborhood, there is a certain responsibility that we have. Growing up I had a best friend in Ohio for 8 years that my father knew but never met his mom. But I went over to their house 2 blocks away every day after school. And I knew without a shadow of doubt that Lula Gale could tan my hide if I messed up. And I know my father figured that was okay if she did.
Right.
She was a mom with capital M, So, being that dad, being that husband, all capital means who you're supposed to be, and are pursuing that. So when I tell my kids that I don't like it, but I'm but I love it. And now I'm to the point where I love it and I love it.
Yeah.
It's because, as Saint Ignatius said, when you are in God's will, you have a sense of peace and freedom, and that's what I've got. I don't have that that sense of quiet desperation. Now, yeah, do I still have frustrations? Do I say, yeah, my wife and I had a tiff this morning, and, and, but I got a little thing from her, text from her just before you and I got started. She said, I'm praying for you. And I know she always is,
Yeah.
And because these capital letters mean something. I think to some extent they've been co-opted.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time we saw a positively portrayed dad on TV?
Yeah, they're always the bumbling idiots or the weak ones, or they definitely. There's not a lot of respect there, at least from the Hollywood standpoint of a dad, for sure.
They've all become Barney Fifes and Al Bundys instead of Andy Griffiths.
Yeah.
So men get this sense that they are worthless by the media that portrays them as such. And so they don't have to be worthwhile husbands and dads. And in fact, if they put their head above the crowd, they're going to get hit with a tomato.
Yeah.
In spite of the resistance, we're still called to be who we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So teaching the boys this, it's been, because it was a leap of faith for me. I got the Lord said, boom, and I said, okay, what do I do with this? And it was essentially practice it. If you believe it, practice what you preach, right?
Right.
So
100%.
Yeah. So we did. And the real big turnaround in our, not in our family, but in realizing that this really is the deal. My oldest son graduated from high school, and during that time was doing the college, looking at colleges and stuff like that. But we talked about, until you're a man, we can't determine what you're supposed to do. Well, he became a man. We have a man ceremony. We really recognize that, because how many men are actually told you're a man by their own dad?
Right.
And he's the only person who can tell them. So my son wanted to go to, all his life, he wanted to go to Texas A&M University. We live in the shadow of Texas A&M. But he also had other desires, other things. So we talked about, we let the Lord give him all these indications on what he wanted to do with his life and all that sort of stuff, what he wanted to do to support being a man.
Mm-hmm.
And he took a gap year, and then he was accepted at A&M. But prior to that, he had told me, he was applying to Franciscan University at Steubenville, Ohio, and it's a Catholic college, Catholic university. And he said, Dad, I'm not going to apply because we can't afford it.
Mm.
And I looked at him. These words are coming out of my mouth, while at the same time I'm saying, "You're right, we can't."
Right? Yeah.
I said, "Son, if God wants you to go to Franciscan, if that's who you're supposed to be as a Franciscan man at that time of your life, he does not deny that which he ordains."
Mm.
So he said, okay. He applied, and it's $30,000 a year. It's not a super expensive private school, but it's more expensive than the state school 6 miles away from here.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
So he applied and he got accepted in A&M. He got accepted at Franciscan. Which was great news. At the same time, I'm thinking, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And he opened up the letter, and said, congratulations, you've been accepted to Franciscan University, and you have qualified for the Dean's Scholarship, this scholarship, this scholarship, this scholarship, this scholarship,
Wow.
to the point where it was only going to cost us $4,000.
That's huge.
Yeah. I looked at him and I said, where's God want you to go?
Yeah, that's pretty affirming when you not only get accepted, but you've got it, pretty well covered for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, dads, I hear a lot of dads say that, well, I'm my kid's best friend. And I'm sad for that. There's 8 billion people on this planet who can be our child's friend. There's only one person who can be their dad.
Right.
And that's a significant, special, unique relationship. Just like, you might hear more that moms are friends or best friends with their daughters, and that saddens me a bit as well. So you asked, the small M versus big M, culturalized, kind of in the examples and stories, a best friend would say, cool, A&M, that's great. We'll still be neighbors. Let's be roommates. Well, my son's going to school, 1,300 miles away, actually 2 hours away from where I grew up, in a thoroughly dysfunctional family, and only about 35 minutes away from my grandmother's house. And the best friend wouldn't say, sure, dude, move halfway across the country, it'll be great, but the best friend will then say, hey, that's cool, Franciscan, and it's pretty much paid for. That's awesome, but he's not the one who's going to necessarily guide him
right
to the godly decision, or what happens when guys get together, Yeah, I could tell stories, right?
Yeah.
So that the small D dad is friends with his kids. Now mine, I call him buddy. Hey buddy, I got special nicknames for him and all that sort of stuff. But I'm dad.
Yeah. And there's a delineation between, friendship, and as my kids are gotten, like I said, 25 and 23, and now we are our relationship is transitioning to more of an adult type friendship.
Yeah.
However, it's funny because I gotta, we're recording this midweek after Father's Day. And I got a text on Sunday from my daughter who, dude, I mean, I kind of broke down and cried after this text, but she's gone through some weird relationship stuff, and to her admission, by her own admission, she's made some poor choices. But she pointed out that, hey, you've taught me by how you love mom, what a man is supposed to look like, what that husband, is supposed to look like. And then, hopefully, and she mentioned, what a dad's supposed to look like, and father and husband. And that's where the teaching component still exists. And that will always be there, that's a difference between the small D dad who's just like, yeah, go do whatever you want, have as many boyfriends as you need to have. And because I've flat out told her, and she doesn't, they're adults, right? Like they have to make their own decisions, but I flat out said, this is not the right one. This is a bad idea. Usually it's as a result of her asking me that question and then completely ignoring my advice until it finally dawns on her, 2 years later, unfortunately, that I was right.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a delineation. I love that whole concept of big D, little d, big H, little h, big M, little m, because there's even when you're writing, that's called title case, right? Like that's there's a title versus which the title comes, there's a nobility associated with it. There's, with all the rights and privileges, here's your title with all the rights and privileges that come with it, whatever that, when they knight someone or when they give you a degree or, all of those things. With a title comes rights, privileges and responsibilities versus just, just as this is kind of my thing, right? Like I'm just a man or I'm just a dad, all little d.
And nothing's going to change the fact that you have 30 years on your daughters.
Right.
And oddly enough, you've lived with them as long as they've lived with them,
Right.
So you have perspective. And I've told my boys, look, you'll get older and you may ask for my opinion. You may not. I'm still going to give it. You don't have to follow it, but I've got you on experience. And part of my responsibility is to be your dad.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, and my father said that as soon as you're 18, he's done. And he lived by that mantra, So that's very foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just can't turn it off. My oldest, Saturday, I guess. No, it must have been Sunday, or maybe, I don't know, getting older.
A few days ago.
Yeah, and said, I kissed Beth, and we're very affectionate. I got no problem kissing my wife and telling her I love her, and we send little things on text, and we just say love to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It means
right.
And he said, I'm just really glad that you and Mom are affectionate with each other. Because I just don't see that, and I don't, and it lets me know that everything's okay, and it helps me to know who I'm, looking for. Similar to the text that you got.
Mm-hmm.
Those are golden. When we grow up, we all say, when our parents do something or invoke some punishment or something like that, we say, well, I'm not going to treat my kids like that, And I've had to make those actual decisions not to do things the way I was raised. And there have been times when, it's been an actual aha moment, if you will, that this is my opportunity where God's saying, okay, you said you're going to change things. Because I'm a transitional parent. My parents got divorced, so I didn't have a set of grandparents for most of my life. And I certainly didn't have a mother. So my goal is for my children who don't have a full set of grandparents, obviously. My goal is for their children to have grandparents,
mm-hmm.
and obviously to have parents, the natural set of parents, if you will, that the husband and wife.
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions. Well, what if I can't have children? What about adopting? Does that still make me not? Look, St. Joseph didn't, he adopted Jesus, right? Talk about a job. There's so many opportunities. There are kids out there who need dads.
Mm-hmm.
We moved into this house 10 years ago, and right across the street was a young man the same age as my oldest boy, who was, he reminded me a lot of me.
Mm-hmm.
When growing up, we would have called him juvenile delinquent,
mm-hmm.
And always belligerent and stuff. In fact, he came in, and I noticed spray paint cans, missing from my garage, and he wasn't painting. And, so there was a bit of a conflict across the way. His mom was a single mom, had 2 daughters. And it's just a mess. It's just a mess, But I stood my ground, toed the line, and I wouldn't put up with his behavior. And I was the only one who challenged him. And he went off and came back. And came up to me. I was sitting on my patio one day, and he came up to me and he said, he kind of poked his head around the corner. Can I talk to you? So,
Right.
you didn't know I was going to, shoot him, And I said, sure, what's up? And he said, I said, look, I'm sorry.
Mm.
And, he tried to explain what he was sorry for, but, a kid wrapping up, a third of his life, in an apology that's uncomfortable, I said, thank you. And I accept your apology and I forgive you. And it was a short 2-minute conversation. And we shook hands. He walked away. I wound up over that summer giving him a ride to a couple places and that stuff. And he decided he was going to go off and join the Marines, be a sharpshooter.
Yeah.
And, things changed. He wound up not, but I could have just ignored him for those 6-7 years that he was here. I could have just said, well, that's the neighbor kid. He's just, it's not my responsibility,
Right.
but we are our brother's keeper.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't move to this house just to be in a void, be in a vacuum. And I'm the guy who, when, construction workers, which I used to be, are sitting in the Dairy Queen, dropping F-bombs, during lunch in a family restaurant, I'll go up to them and I'll say, gentlemen, I know it's a rough day. It's hot out there, this stuff, but, you're dropping F-bombs. And they'll always say, oh, we didn't even realize it, of course.
Yeah.
But, we'll tone it down. They always do.
Yeah.
But how many men become mice and aren't our brother's keeper? Because these guys don't want to be like this around families either.
Right.
Sure, we all have a good time when, again, you put a bunch of boys together, things like put a bunch of guys together. They're going to be sitting on the patio, outdoing each other, right?
Right.
But the small M has taken over, and it is a title, it is a responsibility, it's a duty, and it's an honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's an honor to be called, to be a man, to be a husband, to be a dad, to be a priest, to be. It's an honor to be called who you are supposed to be. We all have that honor waiting for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that discernment takes a while. We got to be quiet. God doesn't shout. He's in the whisper. And that took a lot of doing for me. Stopping to open my mouth. Not opening my mouth anymore. Making sure that my mouth didn't embarrass more than just my face.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely there's a responsibility that comes with that. And I think that's something that we've lost over time in our own society with, whether it's, fear of quote unquote persecution, which is, a word that is used now that has no meaning versus what it actually means, in our Western society. But, that responsibility of teaching boys, especially younger boys, younger men, just those little nuggets that you can give. I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's got a young daughter who's probably 10, and he was talking about teaching her about men in that context and talking about dating and all that. And Dennis Rainey put out a book. Oh, it's probably 15, 20 years ago, but it was called, Interviewing My Daughter's Dates.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole premise of this was not intimidation, not, shotgun on the wall, all of that stuff. But it was teaching young men how to be men in context of wanting to date my daughter and building those relationships. And those kind of relationships, if you've got a daughter, are, great. If you've got sons, obviously that's direct. If you've got your son's friends, not all those friends are going to have fatherly influences like you were talking about.
That's right.
And so that gives us, my friend does Big Brothers Big Sisters, he's a big brother. That's a formal way to do it. but really just what you're talking about, how can you be influence into other, boys' lives? When we go to church or like even out in public, if there's a little kid little boys, especially, God gave me girls for a reason. I would have really struggled to raise boys because I was one, I am one, and I was it was just a good fit for me to have girls.
Well, it's the same reason I got boys, you didn't get girls.
Yeah, so it's we're kind of designed in that way, but to use that, like, I will correct boys in public. I'm like, hey man, knock it off. You're not. This is, and I've had people that appreciate that, and have people that don't always appreciate that. But it is a responsibility to get, and we've talked about this with other guests, that this, I can't imagine being a young man in today's society. First of all, they don't even know how to, like, the media's, they're trying to redefine even what that means. So like, they don't know who they are. They're the worst of the worst. They're the dumb, bungling people. Like, it's just a difficult place to be. So for those of us, especially that are kind of my target audience with Maxed Out Man, which is, 40 plus, these guys that are kind of, have a little more experience and all that, it's kind of our responsibility to push that forward and to help these kids.
And I'm that 40 plus demographic. When I stumbled upon, finally woke up to, whatever, saw this idea, philosophy, whatever you might call it. Yeah, I tell my sons that if I ever see them going on a date and not opening the door for the girl, I'm going to go out to the car and tell him to drive you home, because he's not the guy for you.
Yeah.
I open the door for my wife. My sons do. We behave that way in public. It's not a show. It's who we are. Mm-hmm. And that, when there's that behavior like you were talking about, I don't know how many times I've been walking around in the grocery store and little kids pestering his mom, and I either I'm talking to him or I'm right at his eye level or whatever. I say, "Is that your mama?" He says, "Yes." "Don't talk to her that way." "Okay." Yeah. And you see this look of, "Well, thank you." Well, she might be struggling with 2 or 3 others,
Right.
And I've got a friend. He's just turned 87, retired colonel in the Army. He used to jump out of airplanes, and I've seen him do this, and I learned it from him. Little kids get out into the aisle in church, and they'll run down the aisle. Well, he just leans out and he snaps his fingers, points at them, and does that. And they look at him, and it's like that little truck in Star Wars, when Chewbacca goes, right? It takes off, and we have that responsibility. If we don't teach our own children, then we don't have any credibility, outside. And it reminds me of a speech that Rich DeVos did. And he was one of the founders of Amway. And this speech was called "Selling America," and it was given in 1967, I think, to a bunch of junior achievement kids in Canada. And these are junior high schoolers, right? And he gets on the stage, and there's 1,000 plus there, and he says, "How many of you want to change the world?" And they're all, yeah. "How many of y'all want to make a difference?" Yeah. "How many of y'all want to clean up the world and make everything better?" And he said, yeah. He said, "Okay, let me ask you a question." And he said, "Is your room clean?" And it's just a silence. Of course, the laughter, but then the silence. And he said, "Think about it. How can you fix the world if you don't have your own life fixed? If you can't clean up your own room, how can you clean up the world?"
Yeah.
And it's simple. We're all hypocrites to some point, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
We splinter in your eye, beam in mine. It's very easy to criticize someone else, or to even say, "Well, don't treat me that way," even though I'm treating you the same way. It's all by example. I can't fix the world. I can't really do anything for 8 billion people, except give them 3 men.
Mm-hmm.
And if those men become husbands and dads, or if they become single leaders or priests or deacons, brother, whatever, my purpose, our first purpose as dads, if you will, is to love their mother
Mm-hmm.
and to raise them to be men, and to tell them when they are men.
Mm-hmm.
My father never did that, and it took some soul searching for me to realize that I am a man. After a lot of note taking, I used to follow my father-in-law, my future father-in-law, around with a notepad, taking notes on how he was doing it.
Wow. Yeah.
But it wasn't really until after I, started the man, husband, dad stuff that I realized that I wasn't.
Yeah.
And that even though I hadn't been told that, I was affirmed by other men in my community. It's very difficult. It's difficult for a single mom to do that for her boys. Just as difficult as it would be for me to raise daughters on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not one.
Right.
I was a Cub Scout leader, and a woman brought her son to Cub Scouts, and I asked her why she was doing it. She's a single mom. She said, "Well, because I don't know how to be a man."
Mm.
And I said, "All right, would you be the assistant den leader?" She said, "Okay," Then we went from there, and but what a gift she gave her son to put him around other men. We become like those who we associate with.
Right.
That's a natural law. That's why we tell our kids, don't go hang out on the street corner with those gang members. Why? Because you'll become a gang member.
Right.
It's simple math, right? Well, if that is true, then then it's true that if you hang out with, and this is what I learned in the Amway situation, I started hanging out with millionaires and people who love their wives.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you will, whatever the stigma was or is, I don't know. I haven't been involved for 20 years, but I learned from good people, and they made me read a new book every month, and that sticks with you.
Yeah.
Reading is really important because it's something about reading that sticks in you, and that's. I get a little passionate about it. I don't know if that shows.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think you made a good point with I've talked about it on the podcast before that I open, unless there's a physical reason I can't, I open my wife's door every time. And that's just one of those things that I do to show her respect and care and honor her and all those. So for the guys that are listening to this, if you're not currently doing this, start.
She'll love it. And if she says, I don't need my door open for you, you say, well, I need to open your door for you. I need that. My wife waits by the door.
Yeah, mine too most of the time. So yeah, and my wife is like yours, kind of. I call her a badass because she's a cake decorator, welder, off-road racer. She does all this crazy stuff, but she still allows me to open my door. So. So that's part of being a husband, and that capital H husband. My kids, I always use the Bill Cosby, who's kind of on the outs now, but he had a great line that that
doesn't make his truth. He has truth.
Yeah, and he had this great line where it said, "Hey, don't mess with me. I'll make two more just like you."
That's right.
To his kids.
At the end of this world, I can take you out.
That's right. And my kids, I used to joke and tell my kids that, but they knew that mom always came first. Like that's, that, and that relationship is what built the rest of our family. And so, hey, I think this has been awesome. I think you've really offered a lot of insight, and I just love the concept of man, husband, dad. And so where are we going to find you? We're going to, wholly-owned-and-operated.com and manhusbanddad.com, or however else?
Go to manhusbanddad.com too. I think that actually directs to the man, husband, dad stuff on the website. It may not. That's been a transition over the last year. and it was a big site that we're moving over to this other big site.
Yeah.
I say we. Who's the tech guy?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, so wholly owned and operated. That's HOLY, owned and operated .com. And I can be emailed at my first name, in front of all that, Kristofer. And I think they'll see on the video or something that, my name's spelled differently.
Yeah, I'll put those in the show notes and all that too.
Yeah, this has been great. I really love what you're doing. You had your neighbor, 90 plus years old, on, and like my 87-year-old friend, when his name is Kevin, as a matter of fact, when he and I we have breakfast once a month, and when he talks, I got nothing.
Yeah,
I got nothing to offer this guy. Everything he says is wisdom. Even if it isn't, what do I have to offer to him? You've got, your 90-year-old neighbor, who's twice as old as, the demographic that you're shooting for. We have to listen to him over and over again. I hope you have him back. I know you mentioned at the end, it'd be great to come back. I think for all these,
he always jokes with me. We did a Bible study with him last night. We do it every Tuesday, and he's like, "Well, if I live that long, we could do it again in a couple of months." I mean, he's 92. He's very pragmatic. It's hilarious, but yeah, I definitely want to have Fred back on, and that's episode like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So go back and listen to that.
All these guys that you've got, it would make a great club or something like that. You add a new member every week. Because, and as I mentioned in our lead up, to getting this scheduled and stuff like that, I used to swear like a sailor, not to demean sailors, but I don't. But at the same time, I accept that people use language that doesn't, like with the Bill Cosby thing. A person can speak the truth and still be anything, anything good or bad. Truth is truth with the capital T,
Right.
And so I imagine these group of guys that you've got, on your episodes, sitting around smoking a cigar, having some good whiskey, and there's where you change the world.
Yeah.
It's 3 boys at a time. It's a couple girls at a time. It's, one-on-one, and however many people are listening to this, but men being men and standing up and saying, this is what a man is. And that's what you've had on all your episodes. You've had men, listening to them, I've gotten the sense that they are who they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And none of them are faking it till they make it, Now, sometimes you got it, sure. But they are who they're supposed to be. They're very real, very authentic. And you can tell a man who he's supposed to be because you can depend on him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and that's what you've got and what you're creating here. I think it's a great thing what you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's been fun, and to be able to build these friendships around the world and continue to just kind of grow this. And it's funny because the tagline for Maxed Out Man is helping you become the man you were made to be. Right.
That's intrigued me.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we really are striving for is to, you don't have to be perfect, just like you're talking about. You're on that road. You're trying to become who you were made to be. You're trying to figure out who that is, right? Like that's the challenge. So I really appreciate you coming on board, and look forward to future conversations and growing relationship and all that. So, give our best to Beth, and sounds like she's an awesome woman as well.
She is. She asked me to marry her, and I jumped at the opportunity.
I get it. All right, Kristofer, thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin. God bless you.
You too.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.